Shabbat Shalom, welcome. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. This is Torah Study for a Shabbos morning, brought to you by Beth Shalom in Encino, California, where the rain has finally stopped.
Yay!
We are finally seeing a little sunshine. Joined this morning by my dear friend, Rabbi Marc Gellman from sunny South Florida. Marc, good morning. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
This morning, we are going to read a double Torah portion, Vayakhel-Pekudei, at the end of the book of Exodus. This morning, we are going to build the mishkan. The end of the book of Exodus is devoted to the creation of a shrine. It's a portable Mount Sinai, a box, a tent, a set of holy accoutrements with which God will accompany this people on their journeys. This was a radical notion for the ancient world, which understood that a God is in residence in a certain place and you had to come to the God. But the idea that the God comes with you, or at least a presence of the God comes with you, and that you build a shrine and you carry that God with you as a nomadic people, that was a remarkable, remarkable idea. We had two Torah portions, Truma and Tetzaveh, which talked about the collection of donations from the people Israel to build this shrine. And now Vayakhel-Pekudei mirror those two exactly, because they give us the fulfillment of the commandments, the building of this mishkan. Curiously, it begins with the commandment to keep Shabbat. So the first thing it says is not that they began working, but the first thing they were told is when to stop working. And that's a remarkable thing, that the mishkan instructions come with a Shabbat clause, that there has to be a day of rest, that the work, even holy work, has to stop one day a week so that human beings can regain their humanity and their connection with God. And it's from that juxtaposition of the Sabbath with the creation of the Mishkan that the rabbis of the Talmud are going to derive their definition of all the things we're not allowed to do on Shabbos, the 39 melachot, the 39 actions, 39 work tasks. They come from the 39 things that we're commanded to do to build the Mishkan. And then we go into the building of the thing. First, the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubim on the top, and then the various the altar and the bread thing. And among them is one very, very interesting, a little bit obscure reference. There's going to build a wash basin where the priests can wash before they offer holy worship, before they offer a holy meal of the sacrifice. And while everything else is made out of gold, the wash basin is made out of mirrors, the mirrors of the women who served in the temple, or served the Mishkan, or served the people. This is the opening of a very, very wonderful, wonderful midrash and a wonderful perception. Marc, why mirrors? Why is the kiyor, the wash basin, why is it made out of mirrors?
Well, thank you. That's it. This whole thing, this whole Parshat, this is when rabbis do movie reviews. There's nothing here that works for modern Jews. And yet those are the ones I love the most, the ones that everyone's given up on. I'm an orphan Torah maven. Whenever Torah verses are orphaned, because most rabbis don't want to talk about them because they're so dry and ancient and irrelevant, I love them the most. So this one, about they're called clay kodesh, these sacred implements, sacred stuff that's on the Temple Mount, includes, as you said, this mirrored wash basin, and it's in 38:8. And it's about, you shall build a wash basin made of the mirrors. 38. Well, I just have 28 here. Whoops.
It's 38:8. It says,
that's
he
what
said,
I thought.
Vayasat tekir nechoshet
Yeah, would you read it?
And he made the laver, the wash basin of copper, and its stand of copper, from the mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
Yes. Okay, so what we have,
Why mirrors? Everything's made out of copper and gold.
right.
Why mirrors?
So the answer comes from the midrash Tanchuma Yilamdenu, which was an early medieval midrash collection, and it's about the mirrors, and it's clearly a preservation of an ancient midrash about the mirrors and the kior. So here's the story. According to the midrash, in this time of slavery in Egypt, the men slaves were forced to sleep in the fields because it took too long to get from their slum into the fields to work. So they just worked them to near death every day, and they slept in the mud, and the next day they got up and worked again. It was an existence of such excruciating pain that it's hard to even speak about it. We dip the parsley, the karpas, into the salt water for the tears of slavery, which does zip nothing to convey the true horror that we were able to leave behind when we left Egypt. So the midrash says what the women would do, they would first of all collect little fish from the rivers and sell them and make some money, and they would buy some cosmetics and paint their face and make themselves look beautiful. And from some of the fish, they would make some fish stew, a special soup. And they would go out into the fields and find their husbands. And they would use the mirrors that they had. Now, remember, back in those days, they didn't have the mirrors we have as mirrors with the silver oxide in the inside. They had polished copper, polished brass, and they would see their reflection in it. They were handheld mirrors, and that's what they would look into and fix themselves up. They would go into the fields and they would essentially seduce their husbands by saying, I am more beautiful than you, you are more beautiful than me, here's some soup, here's some stuff. And they would kiss them and embrace them. Midrash kind of cuts out that, it sort of leaves a little to the imagination. And those mirrors were what they used to make themselves beautiful for their husband. Then the second midrash is about how when they're making the temple and everyone is contributing, they say, the women come forward and they say to Moses, what do we have to contribute? We don't have anything, but here's the mirrors that we used when we were in Egypt. And the people, the priests and the assistants to Bezalel and Moses himself said, get out of here. This is insulting that you would contribute this. And Moses is even angry. He's furious at them. God then chastises Moses and says, who do you think you are? These women saved the Jewish people by bringing joy to their husbands and enabling them to endure slavery. And take these mirrors and make a wash basin out of them, so that every time the priests perform their duties, they would have ablutions, and they would wash their face with water from the wash basin, and there would be mirrors there. And that's the story of the mirrors and the kior. Now, for me, that's only the beginning of this great midrash. The mirrors, for me, are a metaphor. They explain everything about the temple and everything about Judaism. Because the mirror is a pause before you do Jewish things, a pause. Like Psukei de Zimra, like we do prayers before we begin to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, oh, before you do anything, just look in a mirror and ask yourself, who are you that's doing this? And why are you doing this? This isn't just some rote ritual. This is who you are as a Jew. And it's saying, look at yourself and tell me, are you proud of who you see? Is there something in your reflection that you're worried about? Maybe too many frown lines, maybe not enough wrinkle lines of smiling. Maybe you're doing things without the right intention of kavanah, whatever. The mirrors represent self-reflection before we engage in self-motivated mitzvot. The second metaphor of the mirrors is for you, Eddie, and for me. It's for anyone who's a rabbi, anyone who's a teacher, anyone who's a parent, anyone who is involved in some way in teaching other people. Before you do this, before we do what we do, we need to ask ourselves, who are we? Who are we? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Are we doing this because it's a job? Or are we doing this because this is our way of adding to human flourishing? This is our way of speaking God's words in a wounded world, which is why I became a rabbi. What are we doing this for? And I think that's what the mirrors mean. And that's why before anything happened in the temple, the priests had to wash their faces and look in the mirror and engage in self-reflection. And that's what's in this Torah portion, buried and undiscovered and unappreciated by rabbis who give.
Let's go back one more step, though. I want to go back and pick up each of the pieces of that midrash, because it's a beautiful statement. Your last statement, of course, was very touching. But let's go back to the first one, to the Tanchuma, the midrash. Pharaoh separated husbands and wives, men and women, because Pharaoh's hope was to destroy the fertility, the vitality of the people Israel.
And the family.
And destroy the family.
That's it.
By suppressing eroticism, basically. And the women recovered eroticism. So the first thing to say is that eroticism, the attraction that we have for each other, even the bodily attraction we have for each other, not necessarily unholy, that in certain circumstances it is actually a sanctified expression of affirming life and affirming our capacity that God has shared with us to create life in the world. And that the women understood this even when the men didn't, even when the men succumbed to the genocidal plans of Pharaoh. The women said, like hell, we're letting this go. We're not going to let this go. They found a way, the ingenuity of a people, particularly the ingenuity of the women of this people, which is then encoded in the holy accoutrements of the temple. And as you said so beautifully, by building the kior, by building the wash basin out of mirrors, the priest has to look into the mirror before he stands before the people to offer worship. And he has to see himself as he really is. He has to see himself brutally, realistically as he really is. And that is a remarkable statement of what any authority has to do. And if
Yeah.
you connect the two, it's because you can't allow yourself to become Pharaoh. You can't allow your ego to swell so big that you imagine that the people are coming to worship me
Yes.
instead
Yes.
of coming to worship God, and I am only the functionary. I am the conduit. I'm the vessel of this people's prayer, this people's holiness.
Amen.
When I look into the mirror and see myself, and I remember that that's who I am. And that's a beautiful lesson. That is a beautiful lesson.
Thank you.
And
And
now take it one more
let me add
step.
one thing to it,
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
I know Sherry would do it if she was here and we miss her. And that's this. Let's remember all of these clay kodesh were put in the temple, and women were not allowed in the temple. So the point of the mirrors, I think, is a hidden, deeply hidden feminist midrash about, don't forget how you got out of Egypt. You got out of Egypt because women helped you. Shifra and Pua, the handmaidens, the
Midwives.
as we call them now, the birth
Doula.
doulas, right? They helped give birth to babies that Pharaoh wanted killed. And the women were responsible for this, and the mirrors inside the holiest confines of the temple were from women. So it reminds us of the contribution of Jewish women to all of our liberations. And I think that's another sort of secret, hidden element of the mirrors, and the reason why studying the clay kodesh is more important than giving a movie review.
I love this. This is very nice. And and let's go one more step though, but let's go one more. The biggest step of all is that in a certain way, what the Torah is trying to say is that religion itself becomes a mirror. That the whole system becomes a mirror to help us see ourselves as we really are, to see our flaws, our faults, our brokenness.
The Torah is our mirror. The
Right.
Torah is our mirror. And it's then it becomes so phenomenal, this lesson, which is Judaism isn't about figuring out God. Judaism is about figuring out us. Who are we? And what are we supposed to be doing here? And that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Or the mirrors are our reflection, and Judaism is our reflection. And how we are reflected in it is our choice.
And how and that's one of the reasons why it becomes difficult. That's one of the reasons why we resist, why you push back, because we don't want to know that.
Yes.
Because there's a predilection within the human heart to lie not only to God, but to lie to ourselves. And when someone comes and says, but this is who you are, this is what you are, that can be the deepest and most disturbing revelation that one can ever see.
Because if you look at the mirror and you're able to say, here's who I am. I am a person, a human being, a Jew, made in the image of God, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. That's who you are. Our friend David Wolpe taught it in one of his pieces. He has the biggest collection of literary references of any rabbi I know. He's very well read, and he remembers everything he reads.
Brilliant reader, right? A brilliant reader.
Yes, I agree. So David taught that the writer V.S. Naipaul tells of his father's bout with madness that began when he looked into a mirror and could not see himself. He looked into a mirror and could not see himself.
Well, again, so think about where mirrors fit in fairy tales, in literature, in mythology, right?
Exactly. Narcissus, the story of Narcissus looking into the pool of water, which teaches us that, that outward appearances mean nothing. And the story of Perseus and the Medusa, he slays the Gorgon by looking in the mirror so he doesn't look at her snaky head, and he's able to overcome her magic by using a mirror. And we have the Snow White, mirror, mirror on the wall, from the evil queen, who's the fairest of them all. And I think that's a big lesson of the mirrors, a big lesson, which is not to be seduced by appearances, and that we need to see people for who they really are. If we can see ourselves for who we really are, we certainly should be able to see others. And in that, I take great comfort in the fact that Judaism provides us with prayers for when we see a small person, a person who has physical disabilities. We have prayers for each of those. Mishaneh Habriot.
And so one of the really interesting applications of this idea in contemporary life is a tremendous amount of research coming now about the impact of social media on young people, and particularly young women. That the rising rates of depression among teenage girls, young women, is directly related to the rise of cell phones, smartphones, because they're always looking at themselves and comparing themselves to these idealized images of kids on the smartphones, of TikTok and Instagram and these kinds of things. And the obsession with trying to keep up with that image, and the performative aspect of it, that I have to put up an image which is as beautiful, as thin, as calculated as this one. And this tremendous effect. And what educators are trying to do is, as you've pointed out, is to switch that and understand that this is a reflection of your value, not a reflection of your diminishment, of your. It's a reflection of what you bring to the world, and that there's so much more than the surface of what you're seeing. And this is so very difficult for kids to absorb. And you're ending up with all this terrible, terrible depression among kids. And that's one of the sort of lessons of the mirror in this moment of our history, that the cell phone becomes the sort of calculated mirror, but the mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all.
That's beautiful, Ed.
Instead of a reflection of holiness, which is what it was meant to be in the midrash and in the Torah at this point.
Unquestionably.
Now, at the end of the Torah portion, something wonderful happens. Moshe, actually the two artists, Bezalel and Choliav, who were filled with chokhmah, filled with skill, gather up all these things. Following Moses' direction, they build the mishkan. They build the Ark of the Covenant. They build the top with the kruvim. They build the tent that it goes into. They build the altar and the kior and the table and the menorah. They build all this stuff. They build the large enclosure around it. They build the mishkan. And then at the end of the Torah reading, Moses turns it on. He turns it on. Like he does what God told him to do. And it says that the presence of God came and inhabited the tent of meeting. This is really strange and secular, but I remember when I was in 7th grade in electric shop, and we built a radio. That was our project. And I remember the thrill of turning it on.
Yes.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Something that I built actually worked.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't work for long, by the way, but it worked. I got a C. I got a grade in it.
Yeah.
But this idea, let's take the biggest idea as we're finishing our conversation today. Let's take the biggest idea that we human beings can actually create a setting, an institution, a vessel to bring divinity into the world. That we actually have that capacity to bring divinity into the world. And it's made up. It's not made up of the gold of the rich. It's made up of the contributions of everybody in the community. That everyone had a hand in it. so that everyone can look at it and say, well, there's, you see that thread, that purple thread on the left? That's, everyone can point to it and say, that's mine. Now, what do you make of that, Marc? Tell me what this means, that we can actually bring divinity into the world.
Well, I think what it means is, again, it's the mirror. I want you to see everyone in my image, and I want you to respect them the way you would respect me. And I want you to look at yourself. And this is where the act of repentance becomes inseparable from the act of looking into a mirror. Because when you look in the mirror in its deepest meaning, you're asking yourself, who am I today? Am I on a good arc of doing good things in the world? Or am I on a bad arc of deception and fraud and cruelty?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the end, when I first thought about these things, a thought came that I would conclude my thoughts by quoting Michael Jackson's amazing song, "A Man in the Mirror," which has the verse in it, which I'll say in a minute because I would memorize it, is, I didn't do it, Ed. I couldn't quote Michael Jackson in a formal setting. I couldn't do it because of his failure to do what his song said he was supposed to do. And the song says over and over, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. Take a look at yourself and then make a change. And then the greatest words of all, na 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 na, na 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 na.
That's, you quoted Michael Jackson in a Torah. And
I apologize. And I apologize.
No. That is
I do, because it's like playing a Wagner symphony. It's like quoting T.S. Eliot, an anti-Semite, but the greatest poet of the modern.
We separate the art from the artist.
Well,
sometimes we have to do that.
It's really tough with him, but the point is the song is perfect.
Right.
The song is the greatest mirror song ever written.
Right.
And it may be that the song was what he had tried and failed to do.
Yes.
And that maybe the lesson of his life was trying. Maybe, I don't know how God adds up these things. Do you have to succeed for God to credit you? Or is trying enough?
Or maybe the most talented performer and musical artist of a generation was so morally flawed.
Yeah.
So broken in his soul that the outward beauty that he was able to create in his music and his dance and his performance had nothing to do with the brokenness of a soul within, or a little boy who just needed love so badly that he broke so many other people in the process of trying to find it. That's the tragedy of that.
Beautifully said, and I think it's true, and it's why I did it. I quoted Michael Jackson. If you're angry at me, that's fine. Don't blame Ed. It was my decision to do it. And, I'll quote another one who I mentioned, who you also should think twice about quoting, and that's T.S. Eliot, who wrote, "Trying is all that matters. Everything else is just not our business." And I think maybe with Michael Jackson, maybe, and with us, certainly, maybe the issue is to begin our looking in the mirrors, not with succeeding, but with trying.
Opening the eyes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Thank you, Marc. Thank you to Michael Jackson. Thank you to the Torah and to the midrash Tanchuma. We want to wish everybody a really good Shabbos. The Shabbos is Shabbos HaChodesh, which means that this coming week we will welcome the new month of Nisan, which is the beginning of the Passover season. So begin to get ready, figure out what we're doing for Seder, start beginning to think about cleaning out the refrigerator and preparing for Pesach. Marc, a very good Shabbos to you and to your family.
Good
Stay well.
Shabbos. Love you, Eddie.